This is problem 8-12 from section 8.1.1. Basically, it's showing you a way to organize writing the inverse equation by making a table. So here we go. First one says the regular f of x. Here's the equation for it. Original f of x equation. And here's the table that shows you what it does. First thing in terms of x. First thing it does with x is it subtracts 1. Then it takes the square root of it, and it multiplies that by 2. Then it adds 3 in the end. So the inverse, what they're doing is just taking this and writing it first, but you do the opposite. So instead of adding, you subtract 3. Then instead of multiplying by 2, you divide by 2. So that's what how they're organizing this table. Okay? So they want us to copy and complete the table for G inverse if G of x is this. Okay, so they have the table, they kind of combine both of these tables in one for right here. So G of x is done for us. We need to kind of go backwards and fill in what this does. So instead of subtracting 2 at the end, I'm going to add 2 in the beginning. Right? I'm undoing it. Whatever I did last, I'm going to do first. Okay? Last step, they divide by 3, so I'm going to multiply by 3. Then they filled in for us the opposite of squared is taking the square root. Last thing, instead of adding 1, I'm going to subtract 1. Okay? So then it says to write the equations for f inverse and g inverse. Well, f inverse is the one up here in this table. So all we need to do is basically follow the table. And we're going to start with x and then do the stuff to it. So we have to have an x first. The first thing we do with x is subtract 3. And then we divide all of that by 2. Then we square everything. And we add 1 in the end. Okay, so that's that table up there. And now g of x, or g inverse of x, is the second table that we had to fill in. Okay? So g inverse of x, I'm going to start with x. First thing I did was I add 2. Then I need to multiply that by 3. Then I need to take the square root of all that. Last, I subtract 1. Okay? So there are your two inverse equations. Writing a table might be helpful. This was the way we originally learned how to do it. You take everything in order, and then you do the opposite order, and you do the opposite like effect. So instead of adding, you subtract. But we also learned towards later in the chapter, this is I believe chapter 6 stuff, we switched to x and y because those were inverses of each other. It was reflected across y equals x. So that's why we can switch the x and the y, but this is more of a thinking through everything and undoing, reversing the process for finding the inverse equation.